On a chilly Washington evening, one silent action transformed trust to heartbreak and to a reality nobody was prepared to confront. How is one instant able to show us who actually stands for something and who never did at all? If you have ever questioned what loyalty really is, this book will linger with you long after the final page. Press play to explore. On a chilly Washington evening, one phrase destroyed the trust of millions. How does a man become trusted ally and the embodiment of betrayal overnight? And what is it that takes for one to stand up, not only for a leader, but for every heart left behind that stood for something greater than politics? This is the tale of quiet courage that could not be purchased. A tale of loyalty, sacrifice, and the unconquerable will of a nation that still dares to dream. Step closer and notice how a single moment of truth can turn everything around. When American Representative Thomas Massie left all of us speechless by insulting Donald Trump on live TV, it seemed like the political universe just divided into two. But then there came something even more astonishing. Vice President J.D. Vance, Trump's trusted right hand, hadn't remained quiet. He was waiting to lash out. You could sense the tension as the fallout unfolded. The MAGA base was apoplectic, and Vance ensured Massie would live to regret abandoning ship on Trump. Some believe this conflict will be one of the most incendiary moments in MAGA history. In the studio, no one stirred. No one even took a breath. Thomas Massie bent forward, his tone biting and dripping with disdain. "Donald Trump is a—" He hesitated, spitting out the words almost. "He's not fit to govern this nation." Time seemed to stand still for an instant. The cameras continued to roll. Millions of Americans huddled around their television sets, appalled. In hundreds of mega homes, eyes welled up with tears. Grandmothers grasped their hearts. Veterans gazed at the television in shock. To them, Trump had loved America with his heart. He fought for jobs, protected the border, and defended the forgotten. And now this, from a man to whom he had referred as friend. Hashtags such as #MassieBetrayal and #DefendTrump erupted on Twitter within seconds. At the White House, Vice President J.D. Vance stood frozen, watching the clip. His jaw clenched. This wasn't merely an insult directed at Trump. It was a strike against all patriots who still held on to belief. And J.D. Vance was not going to let it pass without a response. "Get the cameras rolling," he instructed his aide, his voice calm but sharpened with determination. America needs to hear the truth about Thomas Massie. Tonight, the world would see a storm unlike any other. Just last night, Trump and Vance had jubilated over a monumental victory, a landmark bill to restore American factories and fortify the borders. But Thomas Massie had voted against it, and he hadn't simply voted against it, he was with the Democrats, laughing and jeering at Trump's attempt. Then, of course, there was the leaked text. Massie had texted a lobbyist, "I'll do whatever it takes to prevent Trump from having another victory. He's a clown." J.D. Vance read those words repeatedly, his fists shaking with rage. This was betrayal, plain and simple. "Sir," an aide whispered, "Massie's receiving huge contributions from organizations that are desperate to kill the bill. They've purchased him." Vance's heart ached. Once, Massie had been a man of integrity. Now he was simply a puppet doing the bidding of Trump's detractors. As J.D. Vance adjusted his tie for the cameras, he knew he wasn't going to simply defend Trump. He was going to dismantle Massie's falsehoods one by one. Approaching the press room, he muttered to himself, "This is for America." Inside the press room, it was packed. Journalists elbowed and stretched their necks as Vance approached the podium. His steady, unblinking stare stopped the crowd in its tracks. "Today, Thomas Massie disrespected President Trump," Vance started, his voice firm and unwavering. "He disrespected each and every hardworking American who loves America, and he betrayed the very people who put their faith in him when they voted for him." Camera strobes flashed like firecrackers. But here's what he didn't tell you, Vance went on, his voice growing cold. Massey has been accepting dirty money. Money from individuals who want America to be weak. He used to be about something, but today he sold his soul to special interests. Gasps spread across the room. That's why he votes against Trump. That's why he insults. He doesn't hate Trump. He's just afraid of losing his paycheck. The audience fell into stunned silence. Then Vance delivered the knockout blow. Thomas Massey isn't standing up for you. He's been paid to stand up against you. Throughout the country, people were overwhelmed with emotion. Veterans tightened their fists. Mothers sniffled away tears. Because MAGA wasn't a political movement, it was a family. And J.D. Vance had just risen to defend that family. Thomas Massey sat in his office, staring at his phone as a torrent of angry notifications came in. Traitor. Sellout. Those were the words that filled his screen. MAGA fans made it clear. Thomas Massey had crossed a boundary no one would ever forgive. He had no notion of the storm he'd brought down on America. Crowds began to form in front of TV channels, waving signs high, "We stand with Trump." A sign read, "Massey is bought and paid for." Even in small towns, people were shaken to their core. In Kentucky, a grandma wept on live TV. "Trump fought for my family when no one else would," she wept. "And Massey spits on him, on all of us." Inside the White House, J.D. Vance was viewing the chaos on the televisions, but he knew it wasn't going to be sufficient to simply sit back and allow it to play out. Massey was already on friendly networks with hosts who were Democrats, calling Trump dangerous and making himself out to be some sort of hero. Vance balled his fist up. He's still lying. It was time to reveal to the country the truth. That evening, J.D. Vance would go live on national TV. And this time he wasn't only going to defend Trump, he was going to dismantle Massey's career step by step. In the harsh light of the studio, J.D. Vance was across from America's most watched news anchor. Millions of Americans watched, heart racing. "Mr. Vice President," the anchor started, "Thomas Massey says President Trump is not fit for duty, and you're defending corruption. What do you have to say for that?" J.D.'s eyes blazed with quiet, controlled fury. "Let me tell you a story," he started softly. "Thomas Massey was a good man once. He loved this nation. But a year ago or so, wealthy lobbyists began writing him checks for millions. They said to him, 'Block every Trump bill, kill MAGA.' And he did just that, they told him." Gasps reverberated in the studio. J.D. stood up and drew out a handful of documents. "Here are the wire transfers. Here are the shell companies that are channeling the money to him." His voice remained firm. Thomas Massey betrayed America for personal gain. The voice of the anchor fell to a whisper. "You're saying he was bribed to assault President Trump?" J.D. nodded once. "Yes. Massey does not actually believe Trump is unfit. He just loves the money." Throughout America, citizens dissolved into tears. Farmers, truckers, factory workers, so many sensed the bitter taste of betrayal. J.D. faced the camera directly. His tone was bordering on tender. "Thomas, you didn't betray just President Trump. You betrayed all Americans who believed in you." In a matter of minutes, Massey responded on Twitter. "J.D. Vance lies to defend a dictator. Trump is done, and so is MAGA." But Vance remained unfazed. Several hours before, he'd walked onto a stage before a cheering throng. Cameras from all the networks trained their attention on him. "Thomas Massey would like you to believe he's a hero," Vance started off, his words echoing clear and loud. "But heroes don't sell out their nation for a paycheck. Heroes don't spit in the faces of the people who elected them." The crowd exploded into a chant. "Traitor! Traitor! Traitor!" Then Vance uttered the words that would be played back 1,000 times. "Thomas Massey isn't battling Trump because he believes Trump is incorrect. He's battling Trump because Trump won't sell out. The crowd was thunderous. The clip went viral on social media. Older veterans wiped away tears. Mothers embraced children, saying in hushed tones, "This is why we love Trump and Vance." In his office, Thomas Massie leaned back in his chair, his phone ringing constantly. His assistants circled him, white-faced. "Sir," one breathed, "it's terrible. Millions are watching the clip. Protesters are camped outside our offices chanting traitor." Massie's hands trembled as he scrolled through social media. Everywhere he turned, there it was. Massie sold us out. He called Trump a... Now he's done. J.D. Vance just ruined his career. Desperate, Massie phoned into a sympathetic talk show. His voice broke as he bellowed, "J.D. Vance is lying! Trump is dangerous! I only spoke the truth!" But America wasn't buying it. In diners, truck stops, and living rooms, people wiped tears from their cheeks. Not because of what Massie had said, but because of everything Trump had done for them. A factory worker sobbed on TV. "Trump gave my husband a job when no one else would, and Massie spits on him. No, we're done with him." Thomas Massie didn't realize it yet, but his time was almost up. While that was happening, J.D. Vance stood before a crowded town hall, his voice steady but intense. "I did not seek this battle," he started, but Thomas Massie led to it. "He betrayed President Trump. He betrayed all of you." The room went silent. Even the kids held their small American flags quietly. Vance waved more papers. "Massie accepted money from those who despise America first," he stated. "He giggled as he voted against the big, beautiful bill. He insulted President Trump in an attempt to distract you from his own corruption." The crowd gasped. A woman in the front row buried her face in her hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. "He used to be a good man," Vance said, his voice softening, almost breaking. "But he let the wrong people control him. And now, he's lost his way." As Vance stepped down from the stage, a veteran with a limp made his way forward and raised a trembling salute. "You're fighting for us, sir." "Thank you." Vance nodded, gripping the man's hand. "This isn't about me," he said gently. "It's about saving our country." But Thomas Massie wasn't finished yet. He tried one last, desperate move. He called a press conference, hoping to clear his name. "This is all lies," Massie barked into the microphones. "I'm the real patriot here. Trump is unfit, and Vance is just his lapdog." As he talked, 100 phones buzzed simultaneously. Reporters glanced down at their screens, wide-eyed. A bombshell video had just been released, leaked by J.D. Vance's camp. On the screen, Massie's own voice played, loud as day. "As long as they continue to pay, I'll vote against every Trump bill. MAGA can whine about it all they wish." The reporters turned on him in an instant. "Congressman, did you say this? Were you bribed to betray President Trump?" Massie's face paled. Sweat dripped down his temples as he staggered backward. Cameras went off wildly as he retreated from the podium. Just at that moment, J.D. Vance posted on Twitter, "Thomas Massie isn't standing up to Trump because he stands for America. He's standing up to Trump because he sold America out." The tweet reached 10 million in 1 hour. All over the nation, individuals sat agog, tears rolling down their faces as they understood how far-reaching the betrayal was. Massie had lost, and J.D. Vance had won the heart of America. The night was meant to be peaceful in rural Ohio, but in a small lounge, a family sat together in front of their television, their faces frozen in shock. I can't believe Massie made that statement about President Trump," the mother whispered, tears falling onto her hands. Her factory worker husband, whose employment had been preserved through Trump's policies, had his fists balled. "Massie betrayed us all," he stated. "But thank God for J.D. Vance. At least someone still battles for the truth." Scenes like those happened all over America. Veterans saluted their televisions. Grandmothers cried into their aprons. Teenagers beat out tweets. Massey sold us out. Vance is the only man with a spine. Meanwhile, J.D. Vance was preparing to talk to the nation again. This time, his words wouldn't only reveal corruption, they'd inspire hope. "Sir," a staffer breathed, her voice trembling, "the entire nation's watching. You have to make them feel hope again." Vance nodded deliberately. "I will." He approached the podium, a field of cameras winking like 1,000 stars. His voice was steady, but had a gravity that extended into every living room. "Many of you feel betrayed tonight," Vance started. Thomas Massey's words weren't a critique of President Trump alone. They were a critique of every forgotten man and woman President Trump fought for. He hesitated, his Adam's apple bulging. "But listen to me now. We will not allow corruption to triumph. We will not allow the greatest fabulist to rebrand truth." Slowly, he raised a plain photo. A factory worker embracing Trump in a campaign visit. "This has nothing to do with politics," Vance declared, his voice sounding full of conviction. "This has to do with people, and I am not going to let Thomas Massey and his strings pullers tear down what we've created together." The audience began cheering. On social media, people wrote messages in tears. "Vance is making me cry. He's the only thing keeping us together at this moment." Thomas Massey observed the coverage from his office, his face pale. His phone rang non-stop. Donors were calling, angry, demanding answers. He was losing his hold by the minute. Desperate, Massey attempted again to fight back. He appeared in national television, agitated but defiant. "J.D. Vance is manipulating you," he insisted, his voice tense with strain. "Trump is dangerous. MAGA is a cult." But just in the midst of his tirade, suddenly breaking news scrolled across the screen. Leaked tape recordings began to play, Massey's own voice, icy and greedy. "Tell them what they want. As long as the checks keep coming, I'll keep drowning Trump's bills." The anchor turned to Massey, eyes wide. "Congressman, can you account for this?" Massey stiffened. He glanced around frantically as the studio grew quiet. His lips opened, but nothing emerged. He muttered something nobody comprehended and ran off stage. MAGA fans all over America wiped away tears from their faces. "He betrayed us," a gray-haired woman wept on national television. "But J.D. Vance, he's our hope now." That evening, J.D. Vance posted on Twitter, "Thomas Massey didn't just betray Trump. He betrayed America's soul." In hours, the post had 15 million likes, and Massey's career nosedived. The Washington night air is bitter and cold, but Thomas Massey sweated with wet brow. Protesters had filled the street outside his house with signs aloft, "Massey betrayed America. We stand with Trump." They shouted like thunder through the darkness. The chants were loud and echoed off the night. "Traitor! Traitor! Traitor!" Inside, Massey sat at his dining table, blankly staring. His phone was not ringing. Staffers had all but ceased answering his calls, and even his top aides were resigning, one after another. "How did it come to this?" he grumbled, his words not quite above a whisper. "I had everything under control." But in a different part of town, J.D. Vance stood tall in front of a sea of people. His voice thundered like a serene storm cloud bearing down, steady and convincing. "Thomas Massey's betrayal is not political," Vance declared. "It's personal. He betrayed every mother, every father, every soldier who trusted President Trump's fight for America." Among the crowd, a little girl hugged her MAGA hat and wiped away her tears. "Thank you, Mr. Vance," she breathed. In diners, truck stops, and warm living rooms across the nation, Vance's words were on repeat. An old veteran sat in his recliner, eyes welling up. "He's standing up for us," he whispered. "Trump gave us hope, and Vance is guarding it." Twitter was set ablaze with hashtags. #We stand with Trump, #JD Vance, our voice, #Massey must resign. Hoping against hope to salvage face, Massey issued a video apology. He stared stiffly before a camera, his eyes agitated and darting. I might have spoken in wrath, he stuttered. But J.D. Vance is falsely accusing me. I've always loved this country. But before he could speak, the broadcast was cut off, breaking news flash. The news headline was sensational. Massey's secret offshore accounts revealed. J.D. Vance presents evidence. The nation collectively gasped. Whatever hope Massey had for forgiveness was lost in that moment. Outside the White House, J.D. Vance stood facing a wall of microphones. His tone now was soft, practically shaking. I know that many of you are wounded, he said. You trusted Thomas Massey. You thought he was one of you, and he spat on that trust. He paused, eyes welling up under the stage lights. But I promise you this, President Trump and I will never leave you behind. We will fight for every factory worker, every veteran, every forgotten American who loves this country. Somewhere, a mother clutching her infant wept quietly as she listened to the broadcast. This man cares, she breathed. He's not a politician. He's like us. Then J.D. Vance leaned forward into the camera and spoke the words that would shortly be indelibly written into history. Thomas Massey tried to sell America, but America is not for sale. Across the country, cheers erupted. People stood in their living rooms clapping through tears. It was more than politics now, it was personal, and Vance had become their voice. In a darkened office, Thomas Massey stared at his phone in disbelief. The screen lit up with a call from his top donor. Sorry, Thomas, the voice said coldly. You've become toxic. We're pulling our funding. Click. The line went dead. Call after call went the same way. Allies who had earlier applauded him for taking on Trump were now walking away. He was isolated. Outside the office, hundreds of demonstrators waved flags and shouted, MAGA forever! Massey never! The noise echoed down the boulevards and into the evening. Within the White House, J.D. Vance viewed the live broadcast. His eyes softened as he noticed a young boy clutching a homemade sign. Trump saved my daddy's job. Vance is our hero. We can't let them down, Vance whispered. His aide, who was next to him, nodded. Sir, America needs you now more than ever. Vance breathed deeply. Then let's finish this. That night, J.D. Vance was again on national TV. His voice was firm, his words holding the quiet confidence of a man who had heard the screams of a nation. Thomas Massey betrayed the people who believed in him, but the truth is clear now. He was paid to tear down everything President Trump built. He paused, eyes shining with restrained emotion. But listen to me carefully. This country is stronger than one man's greed. Together we'll rebuild trust. Together we'll protect America's soul. Across the country, people wept. In Alabama, an elderly veteran stood and saluted his screen. In Pennsylvania, there was a single mother who sat on the edge of her couch, her baby sleeping on her shoulder. She spoke softly to herself, Vance, he's speaking for us. Thomas Massey sat by himself in a dark room, the only light coming from his phone. He read through thousands of comments bearing his name. Resign. You're finished. J.D. Vance exposed you. We will never forgive you. His hands shook. He could sense it. His authority was disappearing by the hour. The following morning, J.D. Vance was outside the Capitol for a press conference. The tension was palpable in the air. Millions of Americans watched in real time. Thomas Massey is not battling President Trump because he disagrees with Trump, Vance started, speaking firmly and loudly. He's battling Trump because Trump won't sell out, and Massey can't abide a man who won't sell out." The audience burst into applause. The reporters looked at each other in shock. On Twitter, the video went viral like wildfire. Within his office, Massey sat through the broadcast, a chilly perspiration running down his back. He could see even his old colleagues retweeting Vance's remarks with hashtags #Massey exposed, #Vance the voice, #Trump and Vance 2028. And for the first time, Massey was aware that there was no going back. J.D. Vance had finished him with one sentence. Millions of patriots throughout America cried, not out of sorrow, but out of pride. Later in the day, Thomas Massey stood at a podium, attempting to save face where he had any left. Cameras pushed in. I never intended to offend anyone," he stuttered, his voice quivering. "This assault on me is unjust. I'm still working for the people." Abruptly, loud slogans filled the air from outside the building. "Traitor! Traitor! Resign!" Journalists started yelling questions across each other. "Congressman, did you receive money to undermine President Trump? Why did you call him names on live TV?" Massey's face flushed bright red. "This is fake news! J.D. Vance is lying!" he yelled, his voice cracking. Then on the live feed behind him came a Kentucky mother, tears streaming down her face. "Mr. Massey," she wept, her voice shaking. "My husband got his job back thanks to President Trump. How dare you spit on us like this?" Massey halted. Cameras closed in on his shaking hands. For the first time in his life, he appeared utterly defeated. J.D. Vance, meanwhile, was readying for the speech of a lifetime. He stood in front of a screaming crowd waving MAGA flags, his face serene but firm. "I know Thomas Massey's betrayal stings," Vance started, his voice echoing across the plaza. "It stings me too. Because once, I trusted him." The crowd fell silent, every person hanging onto his words. "But here's the truth," he continued. "Massey didn't fall because of President Trump. He fell because he let greed blind him. He was a good man once, but bad people bought his loyalty." A factory worker near the front wiped away tears. "You're fighting for us, Vance," he called out. "You're fighting for Trump." J.D. nodded. "And I vow to you, so long as there is breath in my body, I will never betray you." Down in town, Massey sat in his office, gazing blankly at the television. Vance's speech filled the air. Every station, every phone, every diner across America. Then Vance's voice came through one final time, giving the words that would linger for years. "Thomas Massey isn't fighting Trump because Trump is wrong. He's fighting Trump because Trump can't be bought, and Massey hates men who can't be bought." The crowd erupted in a roar so loud it shook the cameras. Online, social media exploded. Massey. Destroyed #Vance. Our hero. Trump and Vance. Forever. Massey's phone buzzed with one final message from his biggest donor. "You're finished. Don't call again." And with that, Thomas Massey's political life was over, not in a blaze of glory, but in J.D. Vance's subtle, crushing truth. Tears streamed across America. Grandmothers grasped their chests. Veterans rose and saluted their screens. Vance hadn't merely defended Trump. He had defended all of them. Thomas Massey sat alone in a darkened hotel room. The drapes were closed, and the blinking lights of the television danced across his white face. Each channel was identical. Vance's speech, the protests, the chants. Massey betrayed us. Trump and Vance forever. His phone had ceased ringing hours earlier. The donors were gone. Even his own aides would no longer take his calls. Massey looked down at shaking hands. It was not meant to be this way. He sighed to the vacant space. And in a tiny Iowa diner, an old woman wiped away tears as she talked to a journalist. "Trump gave my husband his job back," she wept. And Vance, he's battling for all of us. God bless that man. All over the country, increasingly, Americans were standing behind J.D. Vance, and Thomas Massie was quietly disappearing from the world he had dominated. J.D. Vance passed through a sea of crying supporters. He hugged veterans, shook the hands of factory workers, and knelt to talk to children. A small boy pulled gently at his coat. "Mr. Vance, will Trump be okay?" J.D. knelt down to meet his gaze, his voice soft but sure. "He'll be okay, son, because America stands with him, and I'll make sure of that." The boy threw his arms around J.D.'s neck. All around them, mothers wiped tears from their cheeks. As the cameras captured the moment, Vance stood tall and turned to address the nation. "Thomas Massie's betrayal wounded us all," he started, his tone firm. "But we will not allow one man's greed ruin our hope. President Trump and I will fight for you until death do us part." In American living rooms, individuals were crying. Even men who seldom cried were fighting back tears. Later in the day, word came that Thomas Massie's name had been taken off the sign in front of his own district office. Protesters had plastered it with a banner that read, "This office belongs to MAGA." Now, in Washington, J.D. Vance was getting ready to give one final speech. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about healing America. As he made his way to the podium, an aide whispered in his ear, "Sir, President Trump is viewing this live. All of America is." Vance nodded. He breathed in deeply, and his voice shook a little as he started. "Thomas Massie betrayed our trust. But America is greater than one man's error. We are one family. We are MAGA." Then he raised his eyes brimming with conviction, and uttered the words which would be remembered throughout history. "They can purchase politicians, but they'll never purchase the American spirit." The people shouted and wept, and in that instant, even Massie understood. His book was closed. In towns and cities throughout America, citizens took to the streets. Red hats bobbed in the sea of faces. Flags flapped in the heat of summer. Signs were raised high. "We stand with Trump. We stand with Vance." At a rally, a frail old veteran stood at the microphone, his hands trembling. "I served in Vietnam," he declared, his voice breaking. "I know betrayal, but nothing stung like hearing a man like Massie use our president's name as an insult." He stopped, wiping away his tears. "But J.D. Vance, he showed me that good men are still out there." The audience cheered so fervently that it rang out across the fields. In living rooms, TV families cried with tears of pride. Thomas Massie remained closeted, however. His social media accounts were quiet. Even the networks who once rallied behind him now wouldn't answer his calls. As J.D. Vance rehearsed for yet another press conference, his phone rang. It was a message from President Trump himself. "Proud of you, J.D. You've shown the world what loyalty and strength look like. America will never forget this." Vance allowed himself a small, quiet smile. But he didn't lose focus. This moment wasn't about him. It was about helping a wounded country stand tall again. Stepping up to the podium, he looked straight into the cameras. "I want all Americans to know, President Trump is more powerful than ever, and so is MAGA. Thomas Massie tried to tear us apart, but all he did was make us realize how much we love this nation and one another." The mother in the crowd wept openly, holding her child in her arms. "He speaks from the heart," she whispered. "God bless him." As J.D. Vance's words hit the homes of millions, Thomas Massie was alone in his darkened hotel room. His phone vibrated one last time, a text from a former colleague. "They've deleted you, Thomas. It's over." Massie blankly stared at the screen. Outside, he could still hear the chants echoing faintly through the night. MAGA, MAGA, MAGA. Meanwhile, J.D. Vance concluded his speech with one final sentence. a sentence that would be indelibly marked in history books. Thomas Massie isn't fighting for America because you can't fight for a country you tried to sell. The crowd burst out in a roar that shook the air. Social media exploded in an avalanche of posts and hashtags. Families embraced one another. Veterans stood up and saluted their TVs. In that dark, silent hotel room, Massie finally shut his eyes. For the very first time, he comprehended the full meaning of what he'd done. He hadn't slept in 36 hours. His eyes were red and tired. His suit was wrinkled. Thomas Massie tried one last desperate move, an emergency broadcast to the entire nation. The cameras flicked on. He leaned forward, his voice ragged. "America, you've been lied to," Massie croaked. "J.D. Vance twisted the truth. Trump is unfit to lead, and I'm the only one brave enough to say it." But as he was talking, the screen divided in two. Across the way, live video materialized. J.D. Vance, strolling shoulder to shoulder with President Trump into a deafening horde of MAGA fans. The shouts echoed across all TVs across America. "USA! USA! USA! Trump and Vance! Trump and Vance!" Massie glared at the screen in shock. His words were drowned out by the cheering. For the first time, he saw that nobody was actually hearing him anymore. It was done. The rally was charged. Flags waved high in all directions. Tears streamed down faces. Veterans were at attention, saluting President Trump and J.D. Vance as they climbed onto the stage. Trump began speaking first, his voice firm. "They cursed at me. They slandered every hard-working American," he declared. "But we didn't fight for us. We fought for you. And because of J.D. Vance, the truth was revealed." The crowd cheered so boisterously, it shook the cameras. Next, J.D. Vance stood up, his tone composed but full of emotion. "Thomas Massie attempted to split us," he declared, "but he only strengthened us. America is not for sale, not to lobbyists, not to foreign nations, and not to traitors." At the front, a small girl held up a homemade sign over her head. "Thank you, Mr. Vance, for defending Trump." Vance's eyes sparkled as he looked down at her. "This fight wasn't just for President Trump," he said, his voice soft. "It was for every single one of you." The crowd fell completely silent, every heart tuned to his words. J.D. Vance looked straight into the cameras, speaking to millions watching from their homes. "Thomas Massie thought power was about money," he said gently. "But real power, it's loving a country so much you're willing to stand alone to protect it." He hesitated, pulling a deep breath, and delivered the last line, his own voice as hard as steel. "Massie tried to sell America, but America doesn't have a price tag." The crowd exploded. Chants and tears filled the air. Old veterans embraced their wives. Single mothers cried as their children cheered in their living rooms. And in his darkening hotel room, Thomas Massie groped for the remote. With a trembling hand, he clicked off the TV. The screen flickered to black, just like his career. Did this story bring tears to your eyes? Was J.D. Vance's bravery something that inspired you? If you think America could use more leaders like him, hit that like button immediately. Write us in the comments, what would you tell J.D. Vance if you met him? And don't forget to subscribe for more dramatic, heart-wrenching stories that will leave your heart pounding.